Okay, good afternoon from the Midwest. We're excited to be with you again for our monthly Lunch and Learn series. I am Josh Haas, and I'm a board member, vice chair on the Hawk Migration Association of North America board. And we're again really excited to have you join us today, and especially excited to be welcoming fellow board member Robert Spaul, who is going to talk about a very unique and new program that he's developed through HMANA, along with several other partners, to try and gain more awareness and more inclusion of new folks to the hawkwatching game, with the goal of bringing more citizen scientists to our hawkwatch scene, as well as looking for new pathways and maybe undiscovered areas where flights are happening. So we're really excited to hear what he has to bring to us today, featuring his program called the GREAT Great Lakes Hawkwatch. Before we get deep into it, I don't want to steal his thunder any more than I already have. I do want to just go through a few administrative things like normal. We're of course welcoming you through Zoom. We do have things locked down just for our security and safety. We would really encourage you to open up the chat. You can do so at the bottom of your Zoom window. Open up that chat and you're able to chat directly with us as the host, and our board member and staff member Julie Brown will be facilitating any questions that you have. She'll do that near the end once Rob goes through his presentation. Additionally, use that chat, if you haven't already done so, to provide us your email address. If you're not getting our newsletters and communications from us via email, let us know. Go ahead and give us your email address. That will only be seen by the host here, so it won't be public, and we'll add you to our list. Other than that, make sure to peruse your Zoom window. There are some tools, especially in the upper right-hand corner, where it'll say view, where you can change your view to make it exactly how you want it to be. If the charts aren't showing big enough for you, you might want to click that view mode. Try a few different options until you get to a view that looks best for yourself. We are not allowing anyone to unmute themselves, so you won't be able to speak, and you won't be able to share your screens. That's why the chat is so vital and important. Please open that chat and engage with us. I know it's not as ideal not being able to speak with us and see what others are chatting, but we really encourage you to use it because we want to engage with you. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Jane Ferreira, who will introduce our speaker for today. Go ahead, Jane.
Thanks, Josh. I just wanted to note that today is actually the 1-year anniversary of our monthly Lunch and Learn series program. So we're really grateful to everyone who has tuned in over the last 12 months and gleaned so much from these amazing programs and equally amazing presenters. And today will not be any different. So thank you for sticking with us during the pandemic and beyond. This is something we love doing and plan to continue doing. So Rob Spaul joined the HMANA board in late 2020 and has already proven himself one of our most proactive and engaged board members. He's been an avian ecologist for 17 years. He's banded more than 3,500 raptors, and he has conducted full season hawkwatches across 6 states and provinces. And Rob, as Josh alluded, is most excited when he's able to engage with people new to hawkwatching and hopefully sort of inciting in them what would become a lifelong interest and passion, as it has to so many with HMANA and beyond. So we're thrilled he's here today and leading this program, and that he'll be detailing what it's all about for you. I'll see you again at the end, and at this point, turning it over to Rob.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Jane, for the warm introduction, and thank you everybody for coming out today. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully I'll try to inspire you, like Jane said, to pick up a new lifelong passion. So each fall, hawkwatchers congregate, just like the raptors that we study. And we do this for a variety of reasons, right? We get camaraderie out of it. We get long-term data, which is really, really valuable. And it's an exceptional public outreach opportunity to really engage with the public right at our site. Hawkwatching really has that unique opportunity to share with people in real time the passion that we all have. But in the last year or two, congregating has become a little bit more difficult, and a lot of Hawkwatches across the Great Lakes and across North America have had to reevaluate their strategies and adapt. And seeing different Hawkwatches under that stress kind of inspired me to think about different ways that we might try to Hawkwatch. And so today I'm going to try to instill in you an appreciation for some of the valuable data and perhaps different outreach opportunities that exist beyond the long-term monitoring Hawkwatch sites. And to do that, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Great Lakes Hawkwatching and a recent project that I did last fall. So here we can see the major Hawkwatches, the fall Hawkwatches of the Great Lakes. If you Hawkwatch around the Great Lakes, you hopefully have been to one of these sites or potentially some of the smaller sites that exist along some of those same flyways. Today, I'm going to focus your attention on Southern Ontario because that's where I live in Toronto, and that's where I've been Hawkwatching for the last couple of years or so. And it's also where we're going to be focusing the attention for this project coming up. So to get you clued into the Hawkwatches of Southern Ontario, you can see that there's about a half a dozen sites that have been explored, and 4 of those have been collecting data for at least 15 or 20 years now. And we've gleaned some really valuable data over the years. We can see towards the eastern portion of the area around Cranberry Marsh and Hawk Hill in Toronto's famous High Park, we can roughly count between 5 and close to potentially 20,000 raptors migrating through in a single season with a full suite of counters, putting in a full season of effort. But by the time we get down towards Hawk Cliff and Holiday Beach, the volume of raptors has increased by almost an order of magnitude, right? And we could potentially count about 150,000 migrants in a single season. So when I first moved here, that was really astounding to me to get my head around how we go from, maybe 15 or so thousand birds over by the greater Toronto area up to potentially 100 or 150,000 just 100, 200 kilometers to the west. And there's really no long-term sites that are monitoring further north of those. So we don't have a great idea for where those raptors are coming from, aside from what we've learned from eBird and from telemetry studies. So with that curiosity and having never really hawkwatched in the east, I decided to move around in my home area in the greater Toronto area, which is affectionately known as the Golden Horseshoe, and started a project last fall called Hawkwatch the Horseshoe. And my goal was largely to demonstrate hawkwatching as a COVID-safe activity through social media. But more importantly, I wanted to foster awareness about raptor migration and conservation in Ontario. It just blew my mind that there were 15, 20,000 migrating raptors passing right over the city of Toronto every year. And most people here are largely unaware of that. I got my feet wet hawkwatching in the Western United States, and I'd have to climb on top of a mountain, sit out there for an entire season, and I might be lucky to count 3,000 or 5,000 migrants in a whole year. You can get that in a day at some sites here in Ontario. So I had a lot of catching up to do, and I wanted to learn the flight around here. And I also wanted to reach out to my community and engage with some of the community scientists that were here already hawkwatching. But I also have this underlying interest in identifying and describing new or unmonitored hawkwatch sites to try to fill in some of the data gaps that exist out there. So my motivation for that project was born out of some of the things I just mentioned, but also some of my experiences hawkwatching in the area. I've noticed that a lot of people were talking about how there's really waning public interest in hawkwatching in the Greater Toronto area. And we see that through reduced participation at sites, reduced coverage at some of those long-term monitoring sites, and ultimately fewer submissions into hawkcount.org, where we store all that valuable data. And if you visit some of these sites, one thing that jumps out at me anyway is that a lot of them have reduced visibility. As the forests are regenerating around us, we're losing our ability to detect and view the migration in quite the same way. But if you spend some time hawkwatching around here, you start to learn that there's a lot bubbling under the surface. There's a lot of regional debate whether historical sites are really accurately reflecting migration patterns anymore. And a lot of people ascribe that to changes in weather and wind patterns associated with climate change. So where you used to have a north wind day, which presses the birds up against the lakeshore, and gives people a really fantastic migration day. A lot of times now that north wind might peter out by 10 or 11, and the birds, at least at these long-term monitoring sites, just don't show up. They seem to maybe drift inland a little bit as the winds ease. But we'll come back to that. So I also noticed, though, there's really limited diversity of the participants at Hawkwatch sites, despite being in a very diverse population here in the Greater Toronto area and having a great raptor flight. They really struck me as relatively homogeneous communities, and that seemed like a shame. Like we were missing outreach opportunities and engagement with a whole sector of the population. And as I said, I really just have a long-term interest in accounting for migrants that aren't counted at these long-term monitoring sites. So what I did for that project, I went out and I researched sites from eBird. I requested public observations over social media from folks, and I searched through archived data. And I came up with a short list of potential sites, and I went out for about 6 weeks during peak migration. Found myself unemployed at that time, so this was a great time to engage in a project like this. And I went out to about 22 novel or unmonitored sites. And through those efforts, I had 12 what we consider 100 bird days, right? If you have a 100 bird day, you're at least having a pretty respectable migration day. You're clearly viewing a migration, and those are valuable data points. So I was excited about what I could find. I learned about another 15 or so other sites, and I started a database of what I've coined these hidden hawkwatches, and it's growing. I think it's actually closer to about 50 now. And I shared my locations and my eBird checklist from the day, some of my blurry photos of raptors, and I shared those on social media with folks. And in general, it was a modest success. I was excited once the word started getting out. I started hearing from people that were hawkwatching casually from balconies, from parking lots, from all kinds of crazy places that you or I might not expect there to be a raptor migration occurring at. And so here's a map of some of the sites that I visited. You can see I mostly stayed in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, but I did go a little bit further north as well, and visited some other of the long-term Hawkwatch sites in the area too. And like I said, I learned about some sites, and it's a growing database at the moment. So zooming in on the Greater Toronto area, this is about 100-kilometer stretch of Lake Ontario, and I really did relatively well. I found a decent number of sites, and I was pretty excited by what I could see across that whole 6-week window. So through that project, I came to be inspired to do something bigger, try to do something bigger. And that's what I'd like to talk to you all about today. And that is the Great Lakes Hawkwatch. So with a whole slew of wonderful partners partner organizations and contributors, we've come up with a plan, and hopefully we can inspire you all to join us today in that effort. So the Great Lakes Hawkwatch is going to be a 2-day event, and people are going to spread out across the landscape and count at these hidden Hawkwatch sites. And hopefully this will unify the Hawkwatch and the expert birding communities to really raise a voice for raptor conservation. It's going to harness years of Hawkwatch training and outreach that has occurred. Many Hawkwatch sites across North America hold in-house training sessions and workshops to teach people how to ID raptors and potentially how to trap and band raptors, how to engage with the public and educate them and share the passion. And so this is an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that we've got a whole slew of people out there that are really good raptor watchers, and hopefully encourage them to contribute some data in a different way. And through that, we hope to leverage, in some cases, 40 years of data collection that's already been done at the long-term monitoring sites, and see if we can't pair these two data sets and learn something new from it. But underpinning the entire effort really is the goal of attracting a larger and more diverse group of birders to hawkwatching. And we want to do that by creating opportunities to participate and contribute to data collection locally without having to drive a really long way potentially, which can be a real obstacle for a lot of folks. So the objectives of the project are to create an annual raptor migration count, which will hopefully foster submissions from more diverse participants. And through this, we will hope to describe Hawkwatch sites along some of the smaller, lesser known corridors, and describe migration under different wind and weather conditions. So if you go to any Hawkwatch, most Hawkwatches have kind of a prime set of wind and weather conditions. They might tell you to come on a nice north wind day, or if you're hawkwatching along the east shore of Lake Michigan, they might tell you to come on more of an east wind day, where it presses the birds up against the Great Lakes. But we really don't have a great sense for where the birds are flying when we're not under those optimal weather conditions. And hopefully this project can elucidate some of the information that we've been missing for years about that. Like I said, we hope to really raise a voice within the shared hawkwatching and birding communities for raptor conservation. And we want to try to build on the raptor population index, one of HMANA's flagship projects that it engages in with Birds Canada and Hawk Mountain and Hawkwatch International. And so my goal with this project is to try to build on the raptor population index and potentially move us closer towards getting population estimates. And ultimately, we'll hope to model the migration in a novel way using big weather data initiatives, which will hopefully save people the effort of collecting weather data out in the field, and will also give us a more harmonized type of data to work with. So the goal for recruitment here, and you all are part of that today, is that we're going to be soliciting counters from established hawkwatches and reaching out to the broader expert birding and hawkwatching communities. Today really is the beginning of our traditional kind of social media outreach campaign, and we're going to be ramping that up over the next couple months. And hopefully that will garner some new recruits into our effort. But as an incentive and to hopefully ease the learning process for folks, we're going to be offering free training workshops in raptor identification and Hawkwatch methodology to foster new participants. So the basic methodology for the count is going to be working in teams of 2 to 3. So basically that's going to be a mentor and 1 to 2 mentees. So We encourage teams. If you and your partner, you and your friend want to count together, that's fantastic. We want to try to keep those teams together. But we also want to give opportunities for folks if maybe they have been doing this for years but don't have someone that would like to join them, or they've really only just started hawk watching and they don't have someone to join. This will give them the opportunity, similar to the breeding bird survey, to join a mentor for the day, learn from them, and improve their own skills through the process. We will target alternate sites, and we'll also search for new ones. So the database will grow as more people register and share some of their information with us, and as some of the Hawkwatch organizations that have joined the project share some of their local knowledge that they have. We'll start identifying more sites, and hopefully my database of 40 or 50 sites will grow to maybe 100 or so by the time we actually get the count going. But then people will also have the opportunity to search for new ones within their survey area. And we'll talk about that more as we get along. But basically, counters are going to be assigned a 65 square mile hexagonal area, which sounds like a really big area. It's not that big. It's about a 10-mile diameter across hexagon. And I'll show you some images of what those might look like. But you can imagine if you're standing in the middle of a 10-mile radius area, and you've got a spotting scope, right? At the very least, if you see an eagle at 4 miles out, it's very unlikely that me in the next hexagon over is going to be able to see that golden eagle. So this way we spread out across the landscape and avoid double counting birds. The event will run from 8 to 4, just a standard hawk watching day, and we'll have a backup day for inclement weather, or people can submit over the entire period. The moment we are planning this for September 18th and 19th, which is hopefully timed for peak broad-winged migration, broad-winged hawk migration. But if you are at your count location and there hasn't been a flight by, say, noon or so, you're really comfortable, you're not just missing them, that there's just no birds flying there, then you'll have the freedom to search within your sector for a Raptor flight. And we can teach you how to do that. So this is going to be part of HMANA's International Hawk Migration Week, which runs from September 18th to 26th. So this is really going to kick off International Hawk Migration Week with a bang. And throughout the duration of International Hawk Migration Week, we'll leave the data submission process open so people can continue submitting data contributions throughout that event. And we'll have a registration questionnaire that will, aside from collecting basic information, like just, where we can send emails to you, that kind of thing, the questionnaire will account for basic experience. So how many years have you been hawk watching? How many years have you been birding? That kind of thing. And that won't be to exclude any data that we collect, but when we do modeling later on and when we analyze the data later on, that'll allow us to actually analyze it more rigorously if we can account for the different experience between some of the counters. And like I said, so we'll leave that count window open. And so let's say you go out on September 18th or 19th at your site, you're all excited, but you've counted at this spot before and it's not really very good on west wind days, right? And lo and behold, it's a west wind day. So we'll encourage you by leaving that submission window open. You can wait for that east wind day that you kind of know your site is really good for, and you can still submit and kind of show off what your site is really capable of, right? So for 2021, even though the project is aimed for the entire Great Lakes area, we're shooting for a pilot project within Southern Ontario. And we're doing that for a number of reasons, but mostly because the grassroots support for the effort has been generated here in Ontario. And so I think we really have a great potential for success here. Excuse me. So If we consider what we know about the migration routes moving through southern Ontario, right, but from what we've learned from long-term monitoring at these sites, but also from what we've learned from telemetry and more recently from eBird observations, we know that there's a couple predominant flight lines moving through here, at least when it's a north wind day. But we really don't have a whole lot of idea what's going on in some of these other areas. And those are some of the gaps that we're hoping to fill in. But if you really drill down into an area, say down by Point Pelee and Holiday Beach Migration Observatory here at the very southern portion of Ontario, you know, even within those areas, if the flight drifts 10, 15, 20 miles inland, those long-term monitoring sites may not capture it. So this project has the potential for figuring out alternative migration routes, even in areas where we know there's a lot of birds moving through, and we just haven't quite figured out just quite where yet. So here's that spatial configuration that I was talking about. So here's a image of the entire Ontario pilot project area with these 10-mile diameter hexagons across them, right? So if we look at the area from the southern end of Lake Huron to the north shore of Lake Ontario, we're going to have about 8 people spaced out in a line, hopefully, if not in 2021, at least in subsequent years. And through that effort, we'll hope to capture more description of the flight. And so our goal here is going to be to recruit as many experienced hawkwatchers and birders as possible for maximum coverage across these hexagons. But this will be going on simultaneously to the long-term monitoring. So the long-term monitoring is going to be affected by this. If you are counting at your favorite Hawkwatch site for the day, you should still count at your favorite Hawkwatch site for the day, and organize with your organization to make sure that coverage still exists. And we'll use that data and integrate it with the Great Great Lakes Hawkwatch data. And so what that means is that we don't want people counting, you know, right next to a known Hawkwatch site, because we have a pretty good idea what's moving through those known Hawkwatch sites already. So people will be able to submit data from anywhere greater than 5 kilometers from one of these long-term monitoring sites. So there's no problem with having 3 or even 10 people submitting data from the same hexagon, but our goal will be to have one person in charge of at least each hexagon, or as many as we can for the season. So the final details of the project, data submissions are going to occur through hawkcount.org, and there is a way that you can share your checklists from there with eBird, but you can't go eBird into HawkCount. So the opportunity will still exist for you to integrate this with your eBird sightings. Registration is going to open on August 1st, and as registrants start rolling in, we will give more details, but we're going to have free 3-session series of Raptor ID and Hawkwatch methodology workshops for registered participants. And those will happen towards the end of August and beginning of September. And they're going to be hosted by myself and Josh Haas, who's going to run the Raptor ID workshop portion of it. If you haven't had a chance to see Josh's Hawks on the Wing series, he does an excellent job of walking people through the finer details of Raptor ID. So this is a great opportunity to kind of get some of Josh's insights for free. So before registration or even after registration, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me at the address listed on the screen here. I wouldn't be doing my job as a HMANA board member if I didn't encourage everybody. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. I wouldn't be doing my job as a Great Great Lakes Hawkwatch committee member if I didn't thank all the wonderful people who've contributed to this so far. We've had an amazing amount of support so far from the Ontario Field Ornithologists, the Toronto Ornithological Club, Birds Canada, Hawkwatch International, and from HMANA itself. And we're very excited to have recently added Holiday Beach Migration Observatory, Hawk Cliff Hawkwatch. And hopefully, if we can get a few more Hawkwatches before we get started, then we'll really, really get things off with a bang. But I want to really thank all the people on the organizing committee that have helped out with this so far. We're doing a lot of work behind the scenes to try to make this all come together. And then, of course, I wouldn't be doing my job as a Hawk Migration Association of North America board member if I didn't encourage you all to register for HMANA's virtual Raptor conference, which is being held July 28th to July 31st. So with that, I will turn it over to Julie to facilitate any questions that you all may have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob, so much. That was a good overview of the project. We have had a few questions come in. I know you have mentioned that you want this to be very inclusive, it's open to everybody, but it seems kind of Canada heavy. So can anybody is allowed to participate, not just watch sites in Canada, correct?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we're really hoping for good participation from across the Great Lakes. And in the long run, you know, if this project really catches, then we hope that the model will expand out beyond the Great Lakes. So we'll accept submissions from anywhere, and we really encourage participation from folks all across North America.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know, speaking for HMANA, we're excited to see how this pilot year goes and think about expanding this to different regions around the continent. So we're excited. So is this potentially a long-term project? Where do you see this project going long-term?
Sure. I absolutely do see it as a long-term project. Yes, my long-term goal is that this will be similar to the Great Backyard Birdwatch or the Breeding Bird Survey that happens annually and grows annually. I think those citizen science projects really are just fantastic efforts. I went out this past weekend and did my own Breeding Bird Survey route, and I think I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years in a row now, and you know, I learned through it every year. So I really consider myself lucky to do that every year, and I hope that participants of this project will feel the same way this project and keep doing it year after year for sure.
Okay. I did just add the link to our webpage on the HMANA website. That's where registration, a link to registration will be, so you can check out details there as we get them up. One question is, have you had a chance to connect with Ontario Nature for this project? I bet they'd squeeze this into a publication for you before September.
Well, we haven't had a chance to speak with Ontario Nature just yet, but I would love to talk with them, absolutely. And I think maybe on that advice, we'll try to reach out to them in the next few weeks.
Okay. Thanks. Another question we received, what about the minimum requirement? I'm sensing a little bit of hesitation from people thinking they may not feel qualified enough to take part in this. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know you mentioned setting people up with mentors if they're feeling nervous.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that you know, you really don't have to be an over-the-top expert to participate in this project. So frankly, we've been monitoring raptors for a pretty long time. And if someone is able to identify their birds to just say boodio, falcon, eagle, and accipiter, and kind of get through those basics, if you went out to a site and you said, I saw 242 bootios that day, and I couldn't ID any of them to species, that's actually still valuable data, because we have a pretty good sense that if you reported 242 bootios, that probably, given the date of when we're counting, you know, probably 80% of those are going to be broad-winged hawks. A couple might be red-shouldered hawks, and the bulk of them, or the rest, are going to be red-tailed hawks. So that's just a brief example, the fact that we really have a lot of long-term data to lean on when we do this analysis. And so I would really encourage people, if you're feeling on the fence, you can sign up as a mentee, and we can pair you with somebody, and we'll pair you with another mentee as well, so that we have good group sizes out there. So you won't just be paired up with a stranger and be out there alone with them for the day. You'll have a couple other folks with you as well. Aside from that, I would say, we really want this to be inclusive. We really want people who are on the fence to walk out on that limb and take a chance with us. And hopefully, through the Raptor ID workshops that we're offering, and some of the mellower methodology that we're going to have through this project, we're going to encourage people to take that jump and join us. And I have to say, if you haven't been hawkwatching before, this project is designed so that you have time to go out to a Hawkwatch site before participating and kind of get a feel for whether this is something that you might like to do. And so, it's part of International Hawk Migration Week. And that event in general is just designed to get more people out and inspire more people to take up this passion and this data collection opportunity. So, if this project doesn't quite fit for you, I think there are other avenues to get into hawkwatching and give it a try. And maybe you find you like it more than you expected to, and you join this project in a couple of years,
Okay, good advice. Okay, thanks. So Detroit River Hawkwatch on Lake Erie historically had several sites used depending on their wind direction and speed. Would it be appropriate to choose one of those sites based on the winds to perform this count?
Depending on how far away they are from the main site. I don't know Detroit River very well, but I would say if it's if it's more than 5 kilometers away, then I think that would be entirely appropriate. Yeah. And I know some Hawkwatches have, even 3 or 4 alternate sites that they may use. And so I think that there's some level of discretion within each of the Hawkwatch organizations. They know their local sites. And so I think there's some wiggle room for scenarios like that. If organizations think that those sites are important to cover, then yeah, we'll aim to get them covered.
Okay. Roberta is wondering if the app is available for iPhone.
So I think she's referring to the Dunkadoo app. Is that correct?
I assume so. Yes.
I think it is available on iOS and Android operating systems. I'm pretty sure. I remember that.
Yeah, we're not sure about that, Roberta. But there's various ways you can record your data. There will be a data form that you'll take in with you in the field if you're not using a tablet or a phone. So there's various ways you can record that data and then enter it later. Someone is asking if Long Point is part of this project.
Not officially, but we are working with Birds Canada. And so we will hope to have somebody stationed at Long Point for the day, for sure.
Okay. And Nancy is interested in the ID workshops. She's wondering, are they distinct? Do you attend all 3? Can you just do one? Or are they repeated over the 3 dates?
That's an excellent question. So they are distinct. With the Raptor ID, we'll split it up into 2 one-hour sessions so that people don't get too fatigued. And we'll cover roughly half the suite of Raptors in one session, half the suite of Raptors in another session. And then the third session will be an overview of the methodology for counting, as well as some instruction for how best to basically search for a hawkwatch if you've never done that before. So, I've been fortunate to do like exploratory hawkwatching, where we're looking for new sites like this quite a bit in the past. And there are some tips that I can pass on to folks that'll hopefully make it a little bit easier. Because for a lot of us, we show up at a hawk migration site and behold the spectacle above our heads, but it's easy to forget that a lot of hard work went into finding that site at the beginning.
Okay. Jill is wondering if there is a list of Hawkwatch sites for West Michigan she could join for some practice. And I know we could certainly recommend going to hawkcount.org and trying to find a Hawkwatch near you. Maybe you have more advice on that, Rob?
You hit the nail on the head. Hawk Count is the best resource for doing that, for sure.
Okay, let me. Oh, Josh has something to add about Dunkadoo. Just trying to unmute him here. Sorry.
Hey, thank you, Julie. Yeah, just a couple things. So for the Dunkadoo, there definitely is an iOS version. I use it when I'm helping with certain counts just to get the word out. Rob, we'll have to probably coordinate with them a little bit, because normally they would build a specific count site in Dunkadoo for each count that's going on. So that could equate to a fair amount of work for them. And maybe there's a compromise solution that could be used, in lieu of that. As well, living in Southwest Michigan, to the person who asked about counts, there's no official counts going actively right now along the Lake Michigan, Southwest Michigan coastline. However, there are great flights that happen every spring and fall. And so certainly feel free to provide your email address in the chat or contact me at josh@hawksonthewing.com. And between myself and Rob, I bet we could work with you to dial in a location that would be really good for you.
Okay. On that same note, you can also add your email address here in the chat if you want to receive HMANA news, our e-newsletter that goes out about once a month. Just add your email address and we can sign you up for that. We have one last question, Rob. Is the hexagonal map going to be on the HMANA website?
That's a good question. I suppose I hadn't really thought about that. I think for the interest of privacy, for where people may be located for the day, there might be some concerns about that. But it's similar to the way a breeding bird atlas is set up, where it's a huge grid of locations. And just simply putting the hexagons up, I don't think would really be any major concern. I forgot to mention that, when people register to participate, they won't necessarily have to divulge their actual location for where they're counting. If they'd like to keep that private, then they're certainly welcome to. And then the data would just be ascribed to the hexagon. So I know some folks shy away from using eBird in a really highly detailed manner where it's giving your locations out to the internet. And so, that does raise some privacy and safety concerns for people that we want to be mindful of. So I think we'll keep that kind of in mind as we make these decisions. But just a rough set of the hex outlay or overlay on the landscape, I don't think that would be a problem. So eventually we'll probably try to get that up there. Yeah.
Okay, great. And one other question that just came in from Celia: would this perhaps expand in the future to a few counts during the migration season. The September dates are very early for golden eagles and a few other raptor species.
That's right. So this was one of the early things that we left open within the organizing committee. You know, I think that there's still some wiggle room. We'll see how the pilot effort goes for the first year. We decided to target broad-winged hawk migration because it really is one of the unknowns. A lot of the long-term monitoring sites, you know, they oscillate between having these exceptionally good broad-winged hawk flight years and then just tanking the next year and having really low numbers. And you know, we don't think that the populations are oscillating quite that much. We just think that the counts are oscillating a lot. So we wanted to try to target that. You're absolutely correct. If we were to hold this event, say a month later in the third week of October, we'd be able to target golden eagles, rough-legged hawk migration, and I think there's some really exciting data that we could get from that. My only hesitancy with that, having hawkwatched in late October, you know, when the birds aren't flying, it can be a pretty tough day out there, even for the most passionate hawkwatcher. So we went with an earlier date this time around, you know, to ensure or hopefully, you know, increase the likelihood that people will have good count days. But I think there's some room if we have interest in subsequent years and in targeting that different suite of species, trying to get data for them, we could potentially change the date. But you know, I think a season of data will inform that decision a little bit better when it's all said and done.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question.
I'll turn things back over to Jane and maybe she has a question or two from Facebook. Go ahead, Jane.
Hi, thanks for giving me 12 seconds to get back over from Facebook. No, I'm teasing. I think the one question that I was passing over was just something you addressed from Nancy. So it was very similar. I'll just read it though. This comes from someone who says, I'm already thinking of how to replicate this in our Northeast region to see what migration is like in between known hawkwatches. And then he asked about the reason you chose broadwing. So I think you've already addressed that question. And then I just had somebody else just provide their email. So I'm good from the Facebook side of things.
Well, that's exciting to hear that they're considering, you know, expanding it across the Northeast. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think there's a lot to learn from that region as well. And let's do it. Let's cover all of North America.
Indeed. Okay, if there are no more questions, and now I have moved over from Facebook to here, so I think we're good. I just wanted to thank Rob so much, and Rob, I hope this was really not only I know it was beneficial to those tuning in, but I think it was also beneficial for you to hear some of these questions and suggestions as you formulate and really get this thing off the ground. So we're super excited about it. Thank you so much for sharing this project with us and all these folks today. I just wanted to mention for those of you, and I know as Josh has done and Rob so nicely here, this last screen that you're looking at is information for registering for our conference. Because of the timing of the conference, it's actually, we're not going to have a July lunch and learn. So please do join us for the conference. It's just the coolest thing. The number of people we have attending, presenting from across the world on over 16 species and different geographical areas. You can register for everything from one single session to a single day to the full session. And I really encourage those of you watching this to join us, because I think you'll really like it, given your interest in our Lunch and Learn, which will return in August, third week of August. And we will be featuring this time around the folks up in Hawk Ridge who are going to be showcasing banding efforts. So it's going to be a really great show in August. And I can't believe I'm already talking about August, since it feels like we just got into summer and the fact that it's 64 degrees where I am today. But anyway, Rob, again, thank you so very much. Josh, as always, the best host. Julie, the best moderator of questions. And we thank you all so much for joining and hope to see you again, not only at conference, but again in August for the return of Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.